All right, so today, let's talk about Iran, but we're going to do it a little differently. Think of this less like a news report and more like a university lecture. We're going to peel back the layers and get beyond the headlines. Our goal is to really understand the difference between three things that often get mashed together: the ancient civilization of Iran, the modern nation you see on a map, and the specific regime that's in power right now. They are not the same thing. So let's get started. Here's the roadmap for our discussion today. First, we're going to move beyond the caricature. Then we'll dive deep into history with a deeply layered civilization. After that, we'll look at the last 100 years or so in forging the modern state. And finally, we'll connect it all to the present day by looking at the people and the state. Okay, let's dive right into our first section, Beyond the Caricature. Before we can really dig into the history or the politics, we have to set the right mindset. We need a frame of reference that lets us see the nuance and avoid the easy and almost always wrong simple answers. You know, when we look at a place like Iran, it's so easy to fall into one of two traps. On one side, there's the temptation to just villainize it, to see it as nothing more than a geopolitical problem. That's a lazy trope. On the other side, you can fall into the trap of romanticizing it, only seeing the beautiful art and ancient poetry, ignoring the tough realities. The truth, of course, is in the middle. We have to acknowledge the complexity, that a beautiful, profound history can exist at the very same time as a repressive, difficult present. Now we get to the really fun part, Section 2. We're going to go way back in time to really hammer home our main point. Think of it like this. The civilization of Iran is this massive ancient river that has been flowing for thousands of years. The modern political states, they're just currents, sometimes violent ones, on the surface. And this chart, wow, this one visual completely reframes everything. When you hear Iran, maybe you think of the Shah, the Pahlavi monarchy. Well, look at that. That's only 10% of the timeline. The current Islamic Republic, a tiny 5%. The vast, overwhelming majority of the story, 85%, is the deep, ancient history that came before any of that. Just letting that scale sink in is absolutely crucial. And this isn't just abstract history. It has real, lasting effects. Let's go all the way back to 539 BCE. The Persian king Cyrus the Great conquers Babylon and does something incredible. He frees the Jewish people who were exiled there and helps them return home. That single act created a Judeo-Persian connection, a bond, that has lasted for over 2,500 years. That is a civilizational fact, and it runs so much deeper than the politics of any given decade. Okay, let's fast forward a few centuries. After the Arab conquests, Persia becomes part of the wider Muslim world. But here's a super important point. It did not immediately become Shia. The split between Sunni and Shia Islam actually started in the Arab heartland over who should lead after the Prophet Muhammad. It wasn't originally a Persian thing at all. So what happened? How did Iran become the global center of Shia Islam? Well, the answer is politics. Jump to the year 1501. A new ruling family, the Safavids, takes over. And as you can see from this map, they were basically a Shia island in a huge sea of powerful Sunni empires, the Ottomans to the west and the Uzbeks to the east. By making Shi'ism the state religion, they did something brilliant. It was a political masterstroke to unify their territory, create a unique identity, and basically guarantee their survival. But you can't just flip a switch and change a country's soul, right? So how did this new state identity actually take hold? Well, it was a three-part process. First, there was a real cultural fit. Themes in Shi'ism, like the struggle for justice, really echoed older Persian stories and ideas. Second, you have powerful public rituals, especially the emotional mourning ceremonies of Ashura, which wove this identity into the very fabric of public life. And third, the state built institutional weight by creating a powerful and permanent clerical class to guide society. Now, of course, whenever you create an official state-sanctioned identity, there are consequences for those who don't fit in. This slide really captures that complicated reality for minorities. On one hand, you have this incredible history of coexistence, producing amazing cultural artifacts like these Judeo-Persian manuscripts. But on the other hand, you have the constant pressure of state coercion and discrimination. Both of these things were true at the same time. It's a complex picture. And that brings us right up to the 20th century, into Section 3, Forging the Modern State. Here we're going to see how two very, very different regimes use their power to try and stamp their own vision onto this ancient land. First up,
the Pahlavi dynasty, the time of the Shahs. Their vision was all about top-down modernization. They wanted to build a strong, centralized nation based on a kind of secular, pre-Islamic Persian pride. Geopolitically, they were practical, working with the West and even Israel. But, and this is a big but, this vision was enforced with an iron fist, using censorship and the infamous secret police, Savak, to stamp out any dissent.
Then, in 1979, everything changed. The revolution wasn't just one thing. It was this huge coalition of different groups, secularists, communists, religious figures, all united against the Shah. But in the chaos that followed, it was the clerical faction, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, that came out on top. And they created a totally new kind of state, based on this concept, vilayat-e-faqih. It's a really important term. It basically means guardianship of the jurist, and it fuses ultimate political power with religious authority in the hands of one person. So let's tie this all together with one crystal clear example. Just look at the relationship with Israel and the Jewish people across these three periods. Ancient Persia, they were protectors. Pahlavi Iran under the Shah, they had pragmatic, strategic ties. The Islamic Republic, it uses hostility towards Israel as a pillar of its ideology. See the difference? The hostility is a modern regime's posture. It is not some ancient, deep-seated memory. And that takes us to our final, and maybe the most crucial section, the people and the state. How does all of this high-level history and politics actually impact the lives of ordinary Iranians today? Look at this number. 31,000. That is the number of Iranian Jews, a full third of the entire community, who left the country in the 5 years after Israel was founded in 1948, and another wave left after 1979. This is such powerful proof of a fundamental truth. People are not just passive pawns in a state's ideological game. They are real people who make huge, life-changing decisions for themselves and their families based on how safe they feel. So what's the internal logic that drives the current regime's behavior? This little flowchart breaks it down really well. It all starts with the revolutionary ideology. But because that ideology doesn't have popular democratic support, it creates a deep structural fear of being overthrown. And that fear is then used to justify what we can call sacred coercion. Repression is no longer just about political control. It's framed as a holy duty to protect the revolution and the moral order. And this leads us to a fundamental and frankly tragic conflict. On one hand, you have the moral standard, the idea that a state should exist to protect its people. It's supposed to be a shield. But then you have the political standard of an authoritarian regime, where the number one goal is to keep power and protect the mission. And when those two things clash, the regime will always choose its own survival. It will use its people as a tool, as a means to an end, demanding sacrifice from them to keep the state alive. So if you take away just one thing from our discussion, let it be this. Iran is not defined by its current government. We have to remember its deeply layered history. We have to understand that identity has been imposed from the top down by different rulers, both kings and clerics, and most importantly, we can never, ever reduce thousands of years of our rich, complex civilization to the actions and ideology of its current leaders. Which leaves us with this one last big question. And it's a question that goes far beyond Iran, really. It applies to any society, under any government. At what point does an ideology, any ideology, lose its moral authority, lose its right to justify the suffering of ordinary people? That's the question at the very heart of this whole story, and it's one worth thinking about.